best of times, it's hard to predict stock market performance, but it's especially tough when, like now, the world economy is in a spin and every day brings some conflicting economic data. My next guest picks through the daily news to plot the investment strategies of Dubai's biggest bank. Gary Dugan is the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer at Emirates NBD, and he joins me live here in Abu Dhabi. It's been a few years.
It has been, John, indeed.
Gary and I go back to the mid-1990s. I was complimenting him because he doesn't age. That's fantastic. Let's get into the nuts and bolts, but I'd like to start in the Middle East and why we're seeing kind of an early 2012 rally, particularly in Dubai. Is this the worst of the property sector over consolidations taking place, oil prices supporting capital coming into the Emirates?
I think it's very much about the kind of improved leadership that we're getting in Dubai. We've certainly seen many of the businesses transformed by what we're seeing in restructuring and really positioning many of these companies in order to be hopefully global leaders of the future. So I think we've gone well beyond our financial crisis, and now I'm very much on an uptrend.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's something that's sustainable in your view. It's not a blip.
It's not a blip, and as I say, I think it's a generational change, new leadership. Much of that is bringing about improved profitability, and as I say, building maybe global leaders of the future, definitely from this region.
Okay, a different perspective, something we should have you back on in terms of our Arabia 2.0, looking at the future leadership, which is a key issue. Let's turn to the developed markets and the developing economies, and what do you like for 2012? I saw the Federal Reserve was suggesting a slight change here, moderate growth, not modest growth going forward. Let's call up what the early predictions were for U.S. growth according to the IMF at just 1.8% for 2012. The market's up for the Dow Industrials 8.5% so far this year. That number looks a little bit puny, knowing what we see today after the stress test as well.
It does, and I think people are reacting to some of the employment data we're getting, the constant improvement in general confidence amongst consumers and industrialists. If you take those things together with the momentum we've seen in the first quarter, you're getting up to numbers above 2%. So again, that's what I think is encouraging equity markets higher and maybe to a breakout to the upside.
Okay, you're sitting at the crossroads of East and West, as we like to say, at the global exchange. So that's your pick for 2012 as the U.S. market. Let's go to China. You heard Wen Jiabao today suggesting he's not going to provide a lot of leeway for the property market going forward, at least in his last year as premier. 8.2% growth is the original projection. They're leading people lower, they being the leadership, to 7.5%. The market's up solidly so far in 2012. Enough accommodation with interest rates and monetary policy to let this market go further?
We think so. We think monetary policy could be quite easy through this year, and it could be one of the emerging markets that really does surprise us with the pace at which they ease policy. Secondly, you've been seeing encouraging news in terms of control. I don't think it's bad news that they continue to want to improve the backdrop to the property market. It's not bad news that they want to go for a more modest long-term growth, because that'll keep the inflation down and allow interest rates to fall.
Okay, another interesting perspective. How about Russia? Now, this is fascinating because we had the December uprisings, and we've been analyzing this very carefully, as you know, in the global exchange. The growth projections were 3.3%. With all that pressure now and all the promises made by Putin to spend a lot more money, that looks conservative. And I think that's what investors are suggesting as well, with that gain of 15% so far in 2012. What's your view?
Yeah, totally agree. We think the stocks can do maybe another 15% on top. The reason I'm confident about that is the valuations start at a very low level. Very few markets around the world with that kind of GDP growth trading on 6 times multiple for 2012 in an environment with oil prices stay at these levels where the government will generate a surplus and they can spend that surplus in terms of getting more GDP growth out.
Okay, good to see you. Yeah, we'll have you back soon. Gary Dugan once again of Emirates NBD in Dubai.